Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 elections continues. We're interviewing State Senate Democratic leader Chris Larson. He's from Milwaukee. He's seeking re-election in the 7th Senate District. Senator, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks for having me.
Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Well, I have a list of questions, but there's been an awful lot of news lately. Can we start with that just for a minute?
Sure, let's change it up.
The documents revealed that Gogebic Taconite donated $700,000 to groups seeking to help Republicans from Governor Walker on down survive recalls.
Yep.
Your reaction to that, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, this again shows the transactional nature of our state government with Walker and the Republicans in charge. I think when Walker took over, he ended up saying Wisconsin is open for business, and I think people thought that, okay, that's open for all business. But really, what he was trying to say, I think, was that Wisconsin is for sale to the highest bidder, and that's where we've been, where basically you have the most transactional governor, the transactional legislature in the history of our state, where basically money goes into a campaign and you get the policy out. And Gogebic Taconite is, although not the only one, is one of the worst examples of this, where not only did they give $700,000 that we just became aware of to an outside group, but they were directed to do that by the governor, and then very quickly afterwards they took the bill that they wrote with very little changes and changed it into a bill, took that bill and changed it into law. And so you really have a vending machine style government here, where the legislators are just placeholders and being bought by outside interest groups. It's not the Wisconsin way, and I think it's something where a lot of us have our heads shaking and want to see us restore confidence in our government, restore to good government, and move our state forward instead of having this transactional government that we have, this pay-to-play that we keep seeing.
Do you think laws are broken, Senator?
I think it's very clear the laws say you cannot coordinate with outside groups, and I think the latest revelations that keep coming out show that not only was Walker trying to raise money for these groups, but he had one of his top campaign advisors, who was a campaign advisor at the time he was directing this other group, that person was directing the group, Walker was directing money to them and encouraging, and then from these emails it shows that he was openly soliciting money that he wouldn't have been able to take, corporate money, which is illegal to take as a candidate, but can go to these dark money outside groups. So I think as long as coordination is illegal in the state, and it's something that Scott Walker blatantly ignored. Now the question is if he doesn't think the law applies to him, why does he think that he's better than other candidates that run for office, and what's so special about him that he doesn't have to follow the law?
He said over the weekend he did not know about the $700,000 Gogebic donation. Do you believe him, sir?
Considering the fact that we didn't know about this beforehand, and considering that Walker did know a lot of what was going on in these emails and he's been so tight-lipped, I think it's hard to trust the word of the governor at this point. I mean, we just found out about the Ashley furniture thing, and I don't know if you're going to ask about that.
That was next.
Yeah, but that he ended up, that never came out, and the only way that came out is it was leaked outside of a closed meeting, and that's something that the governor single-handedly signed off on, and I'm sure if you had asked him before that, he would have probably swore up and down that he didn't know that money came into his campaign, or that he signed off on a company to slash thousands of jobs while giving him $6 million. So I'm a skeptic. I've been a skeptic from the beginning, but I think for the sake of most people in Wisconsin, it's hard to trust the word of the governor when he's treated the state in such a way.
Well, let's go to issues first. What should be that Gogebic bill the bill that allowed Gogebic to apply for the permit? Mm-hmm. Should that be repealed, revisited in the next session, sir? What should happen to it?
I mean, I think we should go back to the original bipartisan bill that was pushed by Senator Cullen, Senator Jauch, and Senator Schultz, where they ended up pushing a session actually to get folks together to listen to interests in our state, not outside of the state interests, but to put together a bill that would allow generically allow mining in the state and see, look, where are there problems, where can we fix those, let's write a bill. They put that together. They were criticized by both sides at the time, but it gave a very clear path of how you would construct a mine in an environmentally responsible way and in coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers to actually create a mine. Now, the Republicans completely ignored that process, other than Dale Schultz, and they completely walked away from it. And I think if we are going to try and move forward with responsible mining in the state, we have to look at that as a model. And we pointed that out. Senator Jauch pointed that out. Senator Cullen pointed that out. I mean, right now we're just a blip in the timeline of the state of Wisconsin. Over time, the majorities are going to shift. Who's in charge is going to shift. And I think if people are looking for certainty, you have to have bipartisanship. You have to have balance in our state so that when laws change, it's something that's going to be certain for a long period of time, not just we're in charge right now, so we're going to ignore everybody and do it our way. And what history has shown on this is that Democrats were right. We said if you end up trying to go it alone, you're going to break away from the system, and the Army Corps of Engineers isn't going to recognize the process. And so they had the counterproductive result of, instead of actually cutting short the timeline to have a mine in the state, they've actually extended it. So they've actually broken what they tried to fix.
Let's get into issues this way. What are the top 3 priorities of Senate Democrats in the next session, Senator?
Well, the big one is restoring funds to education in our state. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we've seen a historic cut to education, the largest cut in state history to K-12 education, and the second largest cut in the entire country. And I think that's something where we've had such a strong bipartisan tradition to hold education and hold an investment in our future so dear to us, that's something that has been a priority, will continue to be a priority, and we would hope we would have bipartisan support with moving forward.
Traveling with that issue, of course, is the vouchers and choice. What do you think should be in the next budget on that subject, sir?
I think we want accountability. And not just us, but the people of Wisconsin have been demanding it now. I mean, this is a program that's not in its infancy anymore, Steve. It's been around since I was 9 years old, and yet we have not found a way to say we're going to hold them to the same level of accountability as our public schools. So we get hyper scrutiny with our public schools. They have to accept every student, regardless of situation, and at the same time, the voucher schools can throw out children with disabilities, they can throw out the kids who are harder to teach, and they can keep the money, and they don't have to have a same standard for what it means to graduate. And up until recently, they didn't even have a decent standard for what it meant to be a teacher in a voucher schools. And I think those things need to change. If they're going to continue to exist in our state, they're going to need to have accountability so that if you get a diploma from a voucher school, it actually means something in the state.
Do you want to get rid of the statewide nature of choice and just take it back to Racine and your city, Milwaukee?
What I'd really like to see is to be able to allow the locals to decide for themselves if they want to have voucher schools. I think that's an easy compromise that we can get to. Now that they exist in our state, I think you should allow the local school boards to decide whether they want to fund them or not, and to decide if they want to expand them or not, and leave it up to them. I think as much as we end up hearing it from all sides, we do a whole lot better if we allow locals to be able to control their own destiny. And the way that the voucher schools have existed in Milwaukee is they get preferential treatment. They don't have to take the same tests. They don't have to report the same standards. They don't have to accept the same students. But what they do get is guaranteed dollars that come out of the school board, whether the school board can afford it or not. And I think that's something where it automatically creates a competitive environment that's not in a good way. It creates it where they are getting preferential treatment. They don't have to have standards, whereas the public schools do. And they do have to have high performance because the public is watching.
Your reaction to the governor's call for the Senate and the Assembly to withdraw from Common Core standards, sir?
I mean, to be polite, it was a joke. I think it wasn't a conversation. The governor put out what? He put out a one-sentence press release
at about 4:34 on a Thursday afternoon, yes.
And what was his follow-up since then?
Some reporters are asking for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry to ask the questions, Steve.
I understand.
But we haven't. It'd be nice to have a debate, but you need another side to be able to have a debate in the state of Wisconsin. And right now, the governor hasn't been a willing party to move forward on conversations with education. He'll throw a bomb out there to try and distract from the fact that we have huge cuts in our health care, that he has had such a poor performance on expanding Medicaid in our state because he's rejected the funds. And I think he threw that bomb out there to throw a distraction into the mix, but never intended to follow it up with a conversation, because it's something that's bipartisan. I mean, Common Core is common sense. And I think most school administrators, regardless of political persuasion, agree with that. This is something where we want to have high standards for our kids, and they're ready for it. We don't want to hide our children from national standards, and to be able to make sure that they're succeeding nationally.
You listed public schools as a top priority of Senate Democrats. Number two.
Number two, we're going back to that.
Yep.
Job creation.
Okay.
And I think a big piece of that is making sure we're putting the funds that were cut back into technical colleges. In some cases, you have a 95% success rate, where a student comes in, an adult student comes in with their clear sight on what job they want to get. They go through technical college, and they are able to find a job within 6 months. 95% success rate. And I think that's something we should be putting more funds in, because it's being that bridge from being underemployed or unemployed to finding a job that's productive, that they're happy in our community. And that's a big one for us.
Jobs two, what's three?
Jumping into number three, I would say making sure that we overall have a balance to our state, and making sure that the public has input. That's something that unfortunately has been completely lacking. I mean, it's not a specific policy goal, but it's to make sure that, look, whatever policy we're going to have, the public is going to have input, and that we're going to try and find bipartisan support to make it happen. And I think there's a lot of policies out there that have huge public support that have not gotten a public hearing. Everything from redistricting reform to raising the minimum wage to the growing power of making sure that we have marriage equality in our state. I think when there is something that the public is scrambling for and asking for, it's the duty of the legislature as representatives of the people to make sure that we're acting.
Do you agree with the Taxpayer Alliance that one of the toughest issues next session is the transportation funding? Their projection is if you fund transportation at the 2013 level for 10 years, you're $2 billion short. Do you agree that there's a deficit, and how should it be fixed?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the report. I sat in a room with the other leaders, both Democratic and Republican, and I mean, I think that we need to sit down and figure out a solution long term. This isn't going to be one party going it alone to be able to solve the transportation funding issues in our state. But I would say up front that I think most people want to see us fix it first, fixing the local roads, fixing roads that need repairs before we continue to try to expand. I think it's about setting priorities in our state, and making sure that we're fixing our local roads first is a huge priority for Democrats.
Are you open to considering raising the gas tax? Has been increased since 2006, or the $75 you and I pay to register our cars?
Yeah, I mean, I think again we have to have conversations in a bipartisan way before we're going to come up with a solution. And I think that I'm not going to throw us out there until the Republicans are willing to have a good conversation about where we want to go with it. But I think we end up having to look wholesale at how we're funding this stuff before we start figuring out what the solutions are. And it's not going to be a one-person solution. It's going to be a collaborative one to be able to figure out how we're going to do this. We do have infrastructure needs. Nobody's questioning that. It's just a matter of how we're going to address those, what priority we're going to do them, and how we're going to fund it.
Let's talk about health care. Do you think the single greatest need for the next session is to take the federal government up on their offer to pay the cost of expanding MA, Medicaid?
Expanding Medicaid? Yeah, absolutely. There is, on the numbers and on the facts, there is no question that Wisconsin is better off on any metric that you look at. That Wisconsin is better off if we accept the Medicaid expansion. We get more funds from the federal government to be able to cover people. Our cost as a state is reduced. We end up covering more people than we do right now. We don't have to do it in a convoluted way where we're trying to chase people down. And in the case of Walker and the system that he hatched up, where people are falling through the cracks and not being able to get the health care that they should in order to live full lives. And I think on all of those metrics, we save money as a state, people have more access to health care, and on top of that, I think the state is better off overall if we do the Medicaid expansion. I mean, on the other side, Walker's excuse is essentially saying, well, we can't rely on the future of the United States of America, and say that because somehow, even though the country has never defaulted before, that may end up happening. And even if that happens, frankly, we already have federal money coming in for our Medicaid system to be able to fund part of the match. And so his argument falls flat. I think it's purely political to try and stand out, and it's one that's done for the worst of reasons of trying to earn political points with a national base, and does not help Wisconsin at all.
Medicaid reimbursement rates, the American Hospital Association says we're second lowest. Should those be raised, Senator?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, it's part of a conversation that we should have, right? If we're going to accept the Medicaid expansion, then we'll have additional funds to be able to talk about what the local match is, what the reimbursement rate is for our hospitals, and it's something we want to move forward on. And frankly, the Hospital Association, I know they did come out in support of the Medicaid expansion because they would have benefited from that as well. So, I mean, I get that they're asking for this because they're struggling because the Medicaid funds aren't there because we're not expanding in our state. So I'd like to see us move forward on that, on the expansion, and then we can have a discussion on where those rates are.
There's going to be a bill introduced on medical marijuana, and that travels with the issue of Colorado and Washington, legalize recreational marijuana. Your position, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think Wisconsin is far behind the rest of the country, where we're one of the few states that still doesn't have medical marijuana, where we can't come up with a responsible law to make sure that people who would benefit from these drugs are able to get them. I mean, you saw the huge controversy that erupted over cannabis oil, and this was something where it just benefits kids. It's experimental. It has none of the high effects that people were worried about. But even that got to be so controversial it got bottled up in committee until there was public outcry.
Sure.
So I think, look, the country's advancing in this direction, and people are starting to pay attention to which states are moving forward and which ones aren't. And I think for us, I think it's a good first step for us to move forward with medical marijuana. And then, of course, watching closely with what's happening in Colorado and in Washington with decriminalization to see what lessons we can learn from that if we're going to move forward or not.
It was an issue in the primary in your party for Attorney General, the first offense drunken driving crime?
I think we need to treat first-time offenders a little bit with a little bit more stringency than we do right now. I had a bill back when I was a freshman. Well, I guess I'm still a freshman, but when I was in my first term, to have ignition interlock devices become more prevalent in our state, because I think it starts to have that stigmatizing effect of people who have that first drunk driving. Most people who have that first drunk driving offense don't reoffend, but a large portion do. Enough people do that it's becoming a problem in our state. So I think teaching people who are in that situation to say, look, there's going to be a real consequence that you're going to have this on your car for at least a minimum of a year, I think would be a real effect, and I think that's something we should be able to get behind in a bipartisan way. But right now, I mean, we've got the most lax drunk driving laws in the country, and I think we need to be a little bit more serious. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody in the state whose life or their friend's life hasn't been affected by drunk driving in a negative way.
It's a major public policy issue in the city of Milwaukee. The proposed new Bucks Arena. Do you think state government should come up with tax dollars for that?
I think we do need a new arena. I think it's something I'd like to see. I think most people in Wisconsin would like to see, to make sure we continue to be on the map as a world-class state, and Milwaukee is a world-class city. I haven't been privy to the conversations of exactly what the mix is or what the proposals are and how they're looking to fund it. But if we're going to look to have a conversation that's going to include any type of a tax increase, I think you have to start looking at what the needs are of the community of Milwaukee, where we have been cut severely in terms of education, in terms of shared revenue, and not that those things need to be addressed all at the same time, but if we're going to move forward with an arena, if we're not addressing education, we're not addressing public health, and we're not addressing the basic needs of the community where this arena is going to be, I think you're going to see a large backlash from the community. if those problems aren't addressed.
How do you like the super TIF idea? The idea that sales taxes and income taxes within that district would go to help pay for the arena center.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea. I don't think we have anything like it in the state. But again, any of the proposals that's going to move forward, I think we have to broaden the conversation and make sure more members of the community are taking part of it to make sure that something's going to work. So right now, it seems a lot of those conversations are happening in dark rooms where the public hasn't had access to give their opinions on it. I'm open to a lot of these different ideas. I'm not going to stake a clear position other than to say I'd like to see an arena, and I'd like to see the public have more of a say in the conversation of where the funding comes from and what it's going to look like.
And then final question, do you want to highlight differences between you and your opponent on November 4th, Senator?
Yeah, I mean, I think people can look at my record. Over the last 4 years, I've been out in the community. We've put out our newsletters. We've had town halls in each of the districts, or each parts of the district, each of the cities that I have, and continue to invite and encourage people to speak out and let me know when they have opinions on things. And me and my office have always done a good job of getting back to people, whether they agree with me or disagree. We do our best to make sure that people are heard and are going to get a response. And I think that's something that I continue to promise over the next 4 years to my community in the 7th Senate District, and if I'm lucky enough to continue to serve my caucus as leader.
Thank you very much. Senate Democratic Leader Chris Larson from Milwaukee is a Democrat seeking re-election in the 7th Senate District. Senator, thanks for visiting with Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you.
Thank you.